does the idea of taking the matter to the board as a next step, in whatever fashion you described how you'd like to see that done, does that seem like in general something that would make sense to you?
The challenge that I have with that is we had reached an impasse, is that a word?
Whatever.
Much long ago. And why wasn't that done prior to our meeting with you? I mean, if that could possibly be a resolution, why is it addressed here? Why not then?
Before coming to
here.
A mediation.
Yeah, exactly. If that could certainly, if all means had not been exhausted to solve this problem that they have,
within the association.
Then why now?
Is there an answer to that that you could offer?
Probably not one that would satisfy you.
Well, please don't do that. Don't do that.
In other words, don't assume what will or won't satisfy you.
Don't assume. Don't think. Don't please. Just answer the question.
I hope that the two of us would be able to, or the three of us with a mediator would be able to work it out. And where the committee stands on this is very clear. It seems like maybe we aren't going to be able to work it out, in which case I'm offering, another option.
Why didn't you do that before?
I don't want to go to court. I don't want the publicity. I don't want the expense.
The color of our house.
Well, sure, but I mean, I said that at the outset.
So we would like a lot of other houses change their color also. And you said that.
What if you put up a hedge or something to mask it, filter the color of the house?
What if all the people that have their house blue and teal and salmon paint their house all white?
Well, we like a little
like a
color.
Thing,
we
Julie.
like a little color.
It seems like a personal thing, whether you like blue or whether you like purple. It is personal.
It is partially personal.
And it seems like maybe you
but
got
I'm
with a
not
lot
here
of
as
personal
an individual
that didn't like purple.
But your feelings, you're not a neutral person. You're not a neutral party.
That's true, Elizabeth. But if I didn't agree with the position that the committee had taken, I would still, as chairman of the committee, have to come and fairly represent it.
But it's a double-edged sword with you being chairman of the committee and you're agreeing with the committee. Is that you're not arguing in a way that certainly defends my right as a home buyer or our right, and you're not impartial. So it has a different.
Well, neither of us is impartial.
I don't have to be. I'm not on a committee. I'm not representing the community. I'm representing my family. So I don't have to be impartial.
This doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'm chair of a committee.
It doesn't make sense to us. We don't know why we're here today, tell you the truth, Julie.
And the more we talk about it, the more trivial it becomes. Really. I mean, it's so ridiculous. The color of our house. Come on.
Well, I'm
getting a headache. I really am.
I guess one question that I could ask you at this point, and if you're finding this unproductive, it's your choice with how far you continue the conversation. There were a couple of things so that, Elizabeth, if you're ready to check out at this point, Julie, if you're frustrated, you have choices to make about whether you want to go on with this or just, see this as an opportunity that didn't work out and take whatever next step there is. There were some, before you do that, maybe it's worth just reaching some closure on the question of, does it make sense to follow up on the suggestion of going in some way to the overall board of the association? You had a notion, Elizabeth, that if that were going to happen, and I didn't get a sense that you were clear that you necessarily wanted it to, but if it were going to happen, you would be more comfortable with it, some sort of a different process than just having Julie or her committee bring this to the board. You would want that to include some input from either yourself or other people.
I'm just really upset that you assume that when someone doesn't agree with you, it's racial. I'm really having a problem with that. I don't understand that. I told you I have a son-in-law who's African American. I am not a racist.
I'm not going to deal with your guilt.
I'm not
I'm really
feeling
not-
guilty.
I'm not going to deal with your guilt and defense.
I think it's an unfair accusation.
I think a lot of
everybody
things
with
are
white
unfair.
skin does not have racial bias.
I'm not talking about everybody with white skin. I'm talking about you.
So if I don't agree with something you've done,
I'm
that
not
makes
talking
me a
about your
racist?
disagreeing with me.
Well, then how
don't-
do you hook this into racism?
I really don't want to go into
You
it. It's just too
did.
deep.
You brought it up. You started it.
I don't
To me,
think-
this was an issue of homeowners and colors and covenants.
I'm sure.
And you threw the racism into this.
That's right.
And
I'm
I
sure
cannot
I did. I'm
just
sure
let this
I threw
stop
the
at that.
racism.
You did.
Yes, I'm sure I did.
You did. You cited a series of events
And they
in
are
your
true.
life.
They are absolutely
I do
true.
not dispute that they're true. I do have a problem with your attributing them all to me. Is that okay that I'm having a problem with that? And you call that guilt? That's not guilt. You've painted a picture of me, and that's not an accurate picture, and I'm having a problem with it.
Well, Julie, I think what my mom is basically saying is that our house is mauve, our neighbor's house is blue, they are Caucasian, and their kids are friends of mine, and we go to art school together. You don't have a problem with their blue, their deep blue, but you have a problem with our mauve. So she's wondering, yes, is there a racial thing going
And
on
in
here?
addition to several other things, which we've, please.
I do see a difference between a purple house and a blue house.
That's a
I do.
preference.
I do.
That's a preference.
Well,
It
it
seems
isn't
like a
just a
personal thing.
preference. It's
I do not want to go
how many
back
purple
over
houses
all
have
this.
you seen in your? I mean, there
Who
are
really
a lot
cares?
of them. They're not
So
a sort
what?
of standard house color.
So what? What's standard?
Well, this is a community that has a certain
What are you trying to say? That has a certain what?
relatively conservative, predictable,
Well, we're not,
visual tenor to
well,
it.
we're not conservative and we're not predictable. Now what?
You have a problem with us, Julie?
You personally?
Yes.
No. No, I don't, except when your mother calls me a racist. I'm
You
having
are.
a real...
Yeah, you are.
How do you know that? Because I don't like the color of your house? This makes me a racist?
Oh,
Isn't that a simplification?
Please, can we end this torment?
Well, you can end it any time you want to. You have, each of you, put issues on the table, and anytime you want to, you can stop talking about them, talk about different...
Every
ones.
racist I know says, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. My
I
my
am
best friend is black. I'm not a racist.
I'm an artist. I love our purple house. I love my neighbor's blue house. And I love the salmon and the blue trimming that our other neighbors have. I'm an artist, and maybe Judy would like to come to art class with me.
You have a great daughter.
I know.
You have a great daughter.
I know I do.
Well, where do you want to go, folks?
I've offered to take it to the board. I'm perfectly happy to come up with some neutral presenter if that would help.
If you want to take it to the board with a neutral presenter, fine. Fine. I want you to know that irregardless, we are not changing the color of our house. So if you feel if it will assuage you to take it to the board, fine.
Well, if I take it to the board and they disagree with the control committees, the architectural control committee's interpretation of this particular clause, then it'll end there, right? So that would be a resolution. I can't say I'd be thrilled with it, but it would be a resolution. If I take it to the board or some neutral person takes it to the board and they agree with the committee's interpretation of that clause, then we're where we are right now, and then we'll see where we go from there.
I hope we go to a court of law with a jury of our peers.
Elizabeth, I just want to check out with you and also with you, Julie. Obviously, you're not happy about all the circumstances. Are you comfortable with that as a decision with where to take things and where to leave them today? In some ways, and again, I don't want to read things into what you're saying, Elizabeth, just sort of listening to the way you describe that particular step, would you be more comfortable saying I'm just thinking like in the opposite terms. Would you be more comfortable saying, you know what, it doesn't really make sense to delay things. Let's just let this go on to the lawyers and let the chips fall where they may. Is that more comfortable to you?
I feel that it may come to that, but if we're sitting here thinking, oh, there is one more step that we can take by going to the board, and we have certainly a neutral representative, and we can perhaps resolve it in that way, then I am certainly not unwilling to try that. But I am mindful that the board nor the committee is diverse, or it reflects the diversity of the community. So I almost say it with a sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I am willing to certainly be pleasantly surprised at a neutral or outcome. But I do know that I do not foresee that anything the board or the committee can say at this point that would make Bernice or I repaint our home. Mm-hmm. And probably before they would, or put a hedge up and with the beautiful light that we have coming in with those beautiful windows to obscure it with high bushes to hide because of somebody's obvious taste problem. I don't think we will do that either. So we are very clear that we are not going to change the house. We are very clear that, and really in our hearts and souls, feel that we have not violated the covenant of the Architectural Control Committee. So I'm going a long way to say, of course we will try that step. And if that step doesn't work, then they will have to do what they have to do.
Mm-hmm. And does that, and it sounds like you'd have no problem, you're sort of saying right now that everyone should know that your position is that you're willing to take that step, let this be considered again, but that if the decision is the other way, that you still feel strongly that this is within your rights.
We can have our day.
This.
Yeah, I feel
Right.
strongly, and we can have our day in court.
And given that that's so, Julie, that difference is still there,
Mm-hmm.
does that still seem to be a useful step for whatever, from your purposes?
Well,
to
it
get
might
to the
be a
board?
simpler resolution. I mean, the possibility is there that
the board has a
will
different
make
view?
a different ruling, and if they do, then that would, take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, sure, it's not ideal, but it seems like
What would be
a
ideal?
smart next step.
I'm sorry.
Well, and if you were going to take that particular next step, is it worthwhile talking more here about how that, and I'm mindful of the fact that, again, there have been other things as well put on the table, and you're certainly free to talk about those or not as in terms of how you feel, what you feel is appropriate to talk about in terms of the other issues that you've mentioned. That's a possibility. It's also might be. Do you want to also talk further about, if you're going to take this next step, how that would work? I'm not exactly clear on what it would mean to have a neutral representative. I don't have to be clear about that, but you might want to. What does that mean? How would that next step take place? Is that something that it makes sense to spell out further, or are you comfortable just leaving it generally?
I think we kind of put it on the table. I mean, I think if we have to go through the motions, which I don't think is necessary, but to court and everything, I think it's pretty clear that it's a personal thing. It's not anything obscure as they making it sound like it is.
Right, and I'm actually asking you about this notion of going,
He's asking about the mythology.
The previous
board-
step, right.
How is it? What are the pragmatics involved?
Elizabeth, how would it be if I drafted a letter, and I know that I'm not a neutral, I understand that, and couched it in as neutral a way as I can, and I showed you the letter, and you edited it any way you wanted to, and between the two of us, we came up with a neutral presentation of the two sides for the board.
I think, why don't you and Bernice do it?
Would you be willing to do that with me?
Sure.
Okay.
And that would be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess you were right, Baruch, that things started to, you could say, disintegrate. But on the other hand, when you're looking at it closely, it seems as though even though they're cycling back into what might be called old arguments, they're having it in a new way. They're having the discussion in a new way, and even new information comes out at times, so that there's a direct engagement. They're sharing information, but they're also sharing their point of view,
Right.
of how they see things. And that is a positive interaction, even though it may, if you stopped and asked them, it may not feel positive because they're still into the negatives of the situation.
Yeah, although, I think it's direct engagement, and I would even say, and they're getting information, and they're also engaging all in a kind of advocacy for themselves here. Each one is saying some pretty powerful, persuasive things. Each one is directing some pretty powerful questions to the other, and there are responses. You've pointed out to me before, and we've watched this, that they're talking over each other less here and to each other more, so that there are actually
Right.
questions and responses.
Right.
And although they're pointed and they're not sort of always friendly, but there is a sense of strength and engagement and connection in the conversation. And I guess that's one reason why, for most of this segment, I'm not jumping in too much to because it would be breaking that off.
Sure. And you could even call that watching the empowerment and recognition unfold, that you can see it at work in the process.
Right.
That they're involved in that conversation, so that I think it's only when Elizabeth says, "I'm getting a headache," that
Right.
you then take a moment to summarize what's been happening at that point.
And that's almost like a check-in. I mean, if somebody's going to say something, and Elizabeth tends to be the one who says these things through this
Right,
mediation,
right.
interestingly enough, that, I'm getting a headache, I don't know how much more of this I can take, do we really have to go on? Those are points where it seems to me that it's appropriate to step in and check, maybe that's really a statement that
Right.
I've had enough of this.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I guess we're pretty careful about is keeping that option real for the parties, that they don't have to go on. The case doesn't have to continue. It doesn't have to reach a resolution. So I guess I have a tendency to take any comment like that seriously at face value. In fact, most of the time, what's interesting is that the result of those check-ins is that Elizabeth continues to talk.
Sure.
Even though she says, I don't really want to talk anymore, I say something like, well, so you don't really have
Right,
to if you don't
right,
want
you
to.
can-
And her response to that is to go on and talk some more.
Right. It almost gives her a breather, but it also gives her a choice
It gives her a
To-
choice that,
to say she may want to add more.
right,
She
well,
may say-
and then when she does go on and talk more, that she's clearly exercising a choice. Well, I want to go on with this conversation.
Right.
I haven't said all that I want to say.
Right. Sometimes when people look at a tape of a transformative mediator at work, they comment that the mediator isn't doing anything. And as you
Right.
said, you're not intervening for some of a good part of their discussion here. But I would say that you are doing something. Do you want to talk about what it is you're actually doing?
Well, one of the things that I'm doing is trying not to get into the way of productive, effective conversation that they're having. I'm listening very closely. I'm staying as close as I can to their talk as it unfolds, and wanting not to deprive them of opportunities to speak for themselves and to each other. just to go back for a moment, we talked about, their exchange of information and persuasion. Some of the things that are said in this segment were stunning to me in terms of how powerful a piece of insight it was. For example, at one point, when they're talking about whether or not who should bring this proposal to the board, whether it would be impartial, if Julie's committee were to do it, and Elizabeth says, well, you'd be partial. And Julie's response is, well, neither of us is impartial. And Elizabeth comes right back with, I don't have to be impartial. I'm not representing a whole community, as you are. I'm just representing my family.
You're not impartial. So it has a different...
Well, neither of us is impartial.
I don't have to be. I'm not on a committee. I'm not representing the community. I'm representing my family. So I don't have to be impartial.
Now, that's an extraordinary insight that, to me, when I hear parties speak up for themselves in such a clear and coherent way, and I think we hear that very often in mediation, when we don't get in the way of it, which in the transformative model, we're trying not to get in the way of it. It's always very, it confirms for me the validity of the premise that we have that people have what it takes. Parties are able to stand up for themselves and relate to each other and want to do that. And I think that you see that happening in this segment.
Right. I used the term cycling to talk about what was happening here, that the parties are actually cycling through some of the same topics, but they're talking about them in new ways.
Right.
So it's not just repeating an argument they had before.
No, that's right.
But it also indicates that they can move. There's no necessary linear progress that the mediation should be taking in order to reach someplace. That they are going to be going through various cycles of activity, and at the moment they're getting clearer. They're really still. They had started to talk about a possible solution in the sense of taking something to the board, but then they've gone back to talk about their perspectives on the whole situation, so that they've gone around, I guess is another way of putting it.
It's almost like instead of going in circles, I guess we would look at it more as spiraling to a deeper level of understanding, each of them, of what they're saying.
Sure.
And in fact, again, to me, it seems pretty clear that each of these people becomes more articulate about what she is saying in the course of this conversation. And that shift from being less articulate, less clear in understanding what it is that
how they see
I
the
want to say,
picture. Right.
and being able to say it,
Right.
the shift from that to becoming clearer and becoming more articulate and making a clearer and more powerful case for what I see, for each party sees, that's a really powerful sign of the emergence of greater strength, what we call the empowerment shift. And that's happening here. The other thing I think that's interesting, again, that's a repetition. Like you say, these things cycle. By the end of this segment, it really does seem, after they've thought this through this exchange, and again, there's a pause that comes at the end here in response to Julie's comment about you have a great daughter, that my sense is, all right, and now where do you want to go? And the response to that seems to be, again, the response to that check-in surprises me quite a lot, which is that Elizabeth essentially seems to be saying, all right, I'll accept this proposal. Where do you want to go, folks?
I've offered to take it to the board. I'm perfectly happy to come up with some neutral presenter if that would help.
If you want to take it to the board with a neutral presenter, fine. Fine. I want you to know that irregardless, we are not changing the color of our house. So if you feel if it will assuage you to take it to the board, fine.
She doesn't seem quite committed to it. What you were saying before, her language, fine, it's fine if you want to do that. And so that leads me as mediator to want to do a little bit more checking in with her. And I think one thing that's really visible at this tape, at this segment of the tape, when that check-in is done, is that Elizabeth sort of, you can almost see it on the tape, takes a deep breath. There's kind of a pause. There's sort of a pregnant silence. Mm-hmm. And then she says, okay, I think, yes, if we're sitting here, if this one's another step, I'm willing to take it. Would you be more comfortable saying, you know what, it doesn't really make sense to delay things. Let's just, let this go on to the lawyers and let the chips fall where they may. Is that more comfortable to you?
I feel that it may come to that, but if we're sitting here thinking, oh, there is one more step that we can take by going to the board, and we have certainly a neutral representative, and we can perhaps resolve it in that way, then I am certainly not unwilling to try that.
Mm-hmm. And goes on to say what she's willing to do, and and she uses the expression actually at the end of that statement, but we're very clear that we're not going to change the house. We're very clear about this. We feel very strong about. So she's directly expressing this sense of, I'm really clear about this now. I've
Right.
really come to a
Right.
solid point now.
Right. And I'm also struck by the fact that you, a number of times in this segment, offer her the chance to end the
Right.
mediation.
Right.
And that's something that, again, it's a check-in, but it's also, you have no particular commitment to having a particular result. It's
Right.
just offering them, here's one thing that it sounded as though they were ready to end, but
Mm-hmm.
so you simply put that out there,
Mhm.
that you're hearing that, and they choose to go on.
Right. That's what our friend Joe Folger has often called, letting people walk up to the edge of the cliff.
Right.
And that it really isn't till
No.
you get to the edge of the cliff and look over that
Right.
that it occurs to you that's a long way down. And when people see that, then they make real solid choices for themselves, and they don't really make those choices. It doesn't become real to them always until that moment. So it's helpful to let people see that's where they are, that's where they're
Right.
standing.
Right.
Shall we?
Okay,
Shall we go on now? I guess before we end this piece here, I guess we could say what's interesting is this case, in a lot of ways, seems to be over at this point, doesn't it, Sally?
Well, they have a possible solution.
Yeah.
Of going to the board.
Right.
That they've agreed to, so yes.
And Elizabeth seems to be committed to that.
Right.
And
Right, you
Julie also seems to be,
Sure.
committed to it.
Uh,
So that, again, through the sort of check-ins and conclusions through the end of this segment, I guess if you, again, ask the question, where do you think this is going from here?
Well,
it would
I think
be,
you could wrap it up.
you could wrap it up.
Yeah.
So, again, that's sort of interesting in terms of what it means to follow the parties and to not make any presumptions about where they might go if the mediator doesn't step in and wrap it up.
Right.
So maybe
Okay.
we should take a look at the next segment to see what unfolds. And that would be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I had another topic.
No, that's fine. I'm just wondering, is that would then be presented as a letter to the board? Is that the way the board normally considers something like this, through somebody
We
submitting
could put
a
a
letter?
photograph of the house in, and a copy of the paragraph that's in question, and how the committee feels and how you all feel, and let them do it. And I keep going back to this racism and diversity, and you're sighing again, but it's really hard for me to let that go.
Well, that seems like a personal thing also. I know my mom brought that out, but it seemed like it's really, she let it go, and you're still...
But she brought up something really important, which
Yeah.
is that there's no
But we're here to
diversity
talk about
on the board.
house, and you're still being eaten up by, what was bothering her. So.
I'm also trying to respond to what she said. There are no African Americans, Asians, she's right, on the board. And I think that's very unfortunate. And I'd like to see if maybe there isn't something we could do to work on that independent of this. Because it is a matter of election, and elections are coming up soon, and there might be something that we could do to work on that.
Is that something, and that's something you'd like to talk about here, Julie?
Well, I'd sort of like to know what Elizabeth's response to it is. Bernice is nodding her head, but...
I'm spent. I'm sorry. But I'm absolutely, I'm spent.
I think my mom would agree that we need more, different races on the board. I think we have it in our community. Why shouldn't we have it on the board? And I think if the issue was reexamined and we had the different races on the board, it probably would be a different, resolution to all this. A more expedient one and one that...
Or whatever the
clarifies.
resolution was, it would maybe feel fairer because...
Exactly. I think so.
If you're spent, then now isn't the time to have this conversation, maybe, but
Well, I think my mom is...
I would like to have this
a little
conversation.
tired of the issue, but I think she agrees with what I'm saying here.
Is it, and again, that's something you could decide to pursue in the future. It's something that Elizabeth, you've said that you're pretty much exhausted from the discussion today. I don't know how you feel about continuing to talk about this or have a conversation go on between Bernice and Julie about this now, or whether you'd really like to table the whole thing and take it up another time. It's really up to all of you.
I just have such a challenge that it's wearying.
The challenge
I mean the challenge of dealing with racism in America. And in one easy sentence or two, we're going to correct it and make everything all right. And it's just not so easy. And the pain that it inflicts, it's just not like, okay, why this community is quite what? It's got to be at least, 15 or 20 years old, even older than that. And why does someone have to accuse Julie of being what she is, a racist?
How do you know that? How do you know that?
And then after that, she comes and says, "Oh, very conciliatory. Yes, we can make the board diverse now." Huh? Is it just news?
Do you enjoy living in a racist society? It sounds like you're trying to perpetuate it.
No, she
It
doesn't.
sounds
My
like
mom
when
doesn't
somebody
want that.
reaches out to you, the thought that something might change is so traumatic that you don't want to have anything to do with it. It's easier to just accuse people.
No. Julie, reaching out is when you move in next door and somebody knocks on your door and says, "Welcome." Reaching out is when you move in the neighborhood and you say, we've got this monthly meeting that we have. Would you come? Reaching out is inviting us to the table, not being forced to invite us to the table, not because somebody called you a racist, so then you say, oh, I feel so bad, somebody called me a racist, I've got a son-in-law who's black. Oh, well, I tell you what we'll do, we'll get other people on the community, other black people, and therefore you've reached out to me? Come on. And you want to solve it in 10 easy lessons or 2 sentences with a mediator? You cannot cure 400 years of racism in 5 minutes. You
I'm
cannot
not trying
do
to
it.
cure it in 5 minutes. I'm trying to take a step, a little teeny
Well,
tiny
you have
step.
taken the little teeny tiny step, okay? You've taken it, okay? Now feel good. You have taken the tiny little step. Thank you, thank
Oh,
you,
please.
thank you.
Oh.
I'm sorry, but this is just too much.
And so maybe this is a discussion that you really can't have.
Clearly not.
Or that you don't want to have.
It just cannot be resolved so easily.
I'm not trying to
And
resolve.
first of all, somebody has to admit. Not deny, but admit. That's where the healing begins. I heal if I say, I have a problem. Then I can face the problem. But to deny that I have a problem, to deny if I'm an alcoholic and I say, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, the first step is when you stand up in the room, you say, I am an alcoholic. That's when the healing begins. Yes, I'm a racist. That's when the healing begins.
I'm not a racist. I just don't like purple houses. I don't like purple houses.
It's
And
not
to
about
take
your
that
taste.
and translate that into racism is really limited vision.
It's mob. It's a mob.
You keep saying that, but where I'm sitting, it's purple.
It's in the purple family.
I believe
but
that
it's
you go to
not
art school
a
and
mob-
you
it's a
see
mob
distinctions
house.
that I don't see, but it's purple to me. And every other house is blue or yellow or white or beige or gray, and then there's this purple house.
Well, you see different colors. You see different colors, right? And you also clearly see different realities in terms of what's racism.
Well, she said conservative. What did she say? Predictable. So the only thing she left out was white. White, conservative, predictable.
You're stuck.
I'm
You're
stuck.
really stuck.
I'm stuck. I am stuck.
I don't know what else I can do. I'll write the letter. You'll vet it. Between the two of us, we'll work out a neutral presentation. We'll send it to the board, and we'll see what comes out of that.
Okay.
Well, Baruch, I guess it wasn't over. It looks like you couldn't wrap it up there, or at least you made a choice not to wrap it up.
Well, that's true. Both things are true. It wasn't over, I made a choice not to try to wrap it up. And again, I think this really sort of illustrates the wonderful unpredictability of sessions and conversations when parties are in control. Because the choice being made here, which was to go right back into what seemed to have been a discussion of race issues that was abandoned long ago, was the party's choice. And they were the ones that made that. My role as mediator is to support them in making that choice. And the interesting thing also, I think, here is that that ever since introducing this topic, Elizabeth had really abandoned it and really did not want to go back to it. And now, in this section, she really does take the plunge. Just one quick point to make in terms of, again, seeing an empowerment shift, is that in this segment of tape, one can really see Elizabeth's language, the extent to which she's become very strong and clear about how to say what she wants to say.
The thought that something might change is so traumatic that you don't want to have anything to do with it. It's easier to just accuse people.
No. Julie, reaching out is when you move in next door and somebody knocks on your door and says, welcome. Reaching out is when you move in the neighborhood and you say, you know, we've got this monthly meeting that we have. Would you come? Reaching out is inviting us to the table, not being forced to invite us to the table, not because somebody called you a racist.
Reaching out means the following. Reaching out means going to somebody's house. It means inviting them to the table not because you've been forced to invite them to the table. Those are very clear and powerful expressions of what she's trying to say, that she is now deciding to engage in this issue, really mobilizing this strength that she's accumulated during the session.
Right. I'm wondering, though, that I certainly agree with that, and you can see it on the tape, but I'm really just wondering about this whole issue as a subject for mediation, and whether it's what you might call a mediable issue even, or a negotiable issue. And also, I'm certain I'm not the only person looking at this who's thinking you had an agreement, they had a plan of action, if not a full agreement, and isn't this going to blow that apart? And you certainly seem to be comfortable with following them in that direction and not trying to head it off, or and you could have shut it down.
Right. Well, what do you think, Sally? Who should decide whether an issue is a mediable issue? I guess that's the question.
Absolutely, the parties should. I mean, that's our underlying approach to this, is that the parties make the decisions, and we're there to support them in whatever they want to talk about. So you were willing to let the agreement blow up, though, in order to let the parties pursue something that obviously was important to both of them.
Right, and that really is the point, which is that what we're there is to support the conversation that the parties want to have, not to be pushing for an agreement that may not be what they want to achieve.
And even the plan, they had a plan of action that I'm calling the agreement, but that certainly didn't end their concerns over this other issue.
Apparently not.
Between them.
Apparently not.
So even at the end of this one, at the end of this segment, it seems as though Julie, at least at that point, is saying, it looks like we can't have this discussion. So perhaps they have had it sufficiently.
Maybe they took it as far as they could. Right.
Right.
It again seems to be cycling down into this is as far as it can go.
So shall we go back to the tape and see?
It ain't over till it's over.
Okay.
Between the two of us, we'll work out a neutral presentation, we'll send it to the board, and we'll see what comes out of that.
Okay.
That's that much you can agree on.
That much we can agree on. We cannot heal 400 years of racism in
And God forbid we should try.
Well, you tried, honey. You tried. You invited us to the table.
And I would ask you to go home and think about why you rejected it.
I did not reject it.
You certainly did.
No, I did
You
not
certainly
reject
did.
it. I did not
You
reject
certainly
it.
did.
What I rejected is trying to make you feel better about it. That's what I
want to make
rejected.
you feel better.
I'm fine.
No, you're not fine. You sat here
Oh,
for the
you're
last
going to
hour accusing me of racism. You're not fine.
It seemed to bother you quite a bit more than it bothered me.
Well,
I've lived with racism all my life.
Yeah, right. Because
I'm here to talk about the house.
but this is relevant.
Yeah, it's relevant, but
You cannot solve it. You want to feel better.
No, I don't want
Yes,
to feel.
you do.
And
You
stop
said-
imputing feelings
No, I'm not.
to me.
You said, I feel bad. It's unfair. You've been unfair to me. I tell you what I'll do to take a step in the right direction. What do you want me to do?
I said maybe we can work on something together. I did say that.
That is what? Getting a commitment, inviting us, diversity to the board, inviting diversity to the committee. That was your step, yes?
Yes. Is that a bad thing?
That's fine. You've taken it. We've accepted it. That's a good idea. My daughter said that was a great idea.
we'll write the letter. I'll write the letter. We can do that. We can do that.
And it might be just worthwhile to, in terms of what sort of someone sitting over here hears you saying, that in terms of this larger issue of of racism, relation between white and black, black and white, that apart from the feelings, not that that's not a major part of it, but that what, in terms of your word was healing, Elizabeth, that you may have different ideas about what that takes, what that means, what that would take. And your comment was, first you have to admit to what the situation is, or, for example, you were saying what that means, reaching out means coming over and knocking on the door, it means this.
Before we get here, yes.
Right, well,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
stage.
Before one compels you to do that, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, and Julie, you're saying that in terms of what it means to talk about that your suggestion of addressing the issue or listening to Elizabeth's comment about the lack of diversity on the board, that whatever else happened before, acknowledging that now and
She's right.
and responding to it, what I hear you saying from your side is that the way you see that is it's not because you want to feel good, but because you acknowledge that, as you just said, she's right.
She's right. There are no African Americans or Asians or
So
Hispanics on the board. She's right.
So what you're saying is,
And we should
separate from how you
fix it.
feel, she's right and that situation is wrong.
Right.
Or as you
Yes,
say.
I am saying that. I didn't use that word, but yes, I am.
So, in other words, but on the other hand, that part of what you're saying may not be responsive 100%. That may not be exactly the kind of thing that Elizabeth is looking for. Again, that conversation is sort of you said, is a hard conversation to have, and it may not be possible to have it, to any kind of a conclusory point, in this room today. You've clearly started to talk about it, and I guess the plans you've made about writing the letter to the board concerning the house are pretty concrete. Is there anything you want to do about pursuing in any way this discussion about diversity on the board, the way in which new people to the community are welcomed into the community or not? Do you want to talk about anything else? Going anywhere else
I
with
can
that
think of
from
lots
today?
of ways to address the issue of diversity in our community. But if I'm going to be met every time with, I don't want to make you feel good, this isn't about you, and rejection of those ideas, then it's very hard to have the conversation.
How long have you lived in this community?
8 years.
8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And did you just discover today that it wasn't diverse on the committee? Did you just today decide to have these conciliatory steps? Was it just today? Was it just today, Julie? Did it ever occur to you 8 years ago or 7 years ago? Oh my, I don't live in a sea of whiteness. There's some Asians over there, there's some Latinos over there, there's some African Americans. I think there's even a couple of African and Haitian families. Did it ever occur to you? No, it didn't.
Did it ever occur to me that this was a multiracial community? Of course, I like it. That's why I'm here.
That your committee
Not
and
that
your
you would
board,
believe that.
That your committee and your board were not diverse, not reflective of the committee. No. And this is all I take exception to. Not that you're suddenly saying, oh, yes, that's a good idea. Let's make it more diverse. But to dare to say, in the one hand, oh, I'm not racist. Oh, no, I like the diversity. As long as we're in our place.
No, that's not what I said.
No, I don't
that's
mean it.
your
That's
language.
it is
and
my
you are
language.
imputing it to me.
Exactly, I am. But if 7 years ago, Julie was a worker or of the mind, I am going to make this community in all ways as diverse as I can possibly make it. And you had opposition. I can understand it. But for you to dare come in here and in 1 or 2 sentences say, oh, yes, let's take steps. And I'm supposed to be what, placated? Well, I'm not.
Not
and yes, I do.
placated,
Yes,
but
I do
willing to
feel,
work with me.
I do.
Not
I
placated.
work with you.
Let's make it better.
Fine.
Mom.
Well, no. Fine. Fine. Fine.
Well, and
But do you see my point?
Because I haven't been an advocate.
well,
Not an advocate, honey.
Because I choose.
Not an advocate. You are the one who's saying, I care. My son-in-law is African American. I moved in this community because I wanted diversity. And yet in your very life, other than your son-in-law, is your world diverse? I don't think so.
You have no idea.
If I'm judging by this committee,
You have
you
no
can nominate.
idea.
Have you ever nominated a
Have you been to my
non-white for the
church?
committee?
Have you been to my church?
Have you ever nominated
Have you been in the city with
Have you
me?
ever nominated a non-white person to the board or to the
But I'm not,
committee?
I'm not on the nominating committee. I mean, it's an
Ah.
irrelevant question.
Julie, you always come up with excuses.
I just think you think everybody who's white is racist.
Please don't do that.
Well,
I am
please, you're
talking
doing
to
all these
you.
things to me.
I am speaking to you, specifically to you,
We're not racist, Julie. My
specifically
mom
to
has
you,
Some
Yeah, okay, me.
to you.
can I ask just a question that I'm not sure whether this will clarify anything or not, but in the way you're describing the questions that you're asking, one of the implications that I'm hearing is when you use a term like racist, in this context, one of the things you mean by it is if you're living in a multiracial community, but participating in the management structure, a power structure that excludes everybody but one group, then whether or not there's an intention behind that or not, it's discriminatory. It's, in your word, racist. It excludes. I'm not sure I'm getting that right, but it's sort of, it seems like you're focusing on
in
the
Julie's
committee-
in Julie's particular case.
I'm just trying to understand.
In
the
Julie's
meaning of-
particular case,
Yep.
because I don't want to, as a mediator, give you this definition of racism. No, I don't think that's an exclusion. It's certainly an exclusion that is questionable. Why is that exclusion taking place in a diverse community? Why? I mean, often people say they
And
want to
clearly
be.
it's all my fault.
Julie, I'm really not only addressing the committee and the board. I'm not holding you accountable for the committee and the board totally. There are several incidences in the community, some of which I have named, that you have indeed, I feel,
Not that you
that
know.
have been racist. That some of your actions,
That I
your
have
words,
indeed what?
and your deeds have been racist, specifically. So now, you sit here at the table with a mediator and you say, I'm trying to take a step to correct the situation. And my daughter has said, that's great. Take the step. Do what you need to do. You've said you can't elect to the committee, you're not on the election, but you're going to take steps to make it more diverse. Do what you can. And I'm saying to you that the reason that I haven't turned on a dime and said, oh, thank you, great, is because you've been here 8 years. And what has it taken for you to make those steps? Has your heart been open in the 8 years? Yes, you moved in this community because you wanted diversity. What, to say you lived in a diverse, multiracial community? Multiracial diversity to me means some kind of interaction. It doesn't mean staying secular or integrated within your own separate groups. It doesn't mean the board, after umpteen years of a community existing, that it's still all white board, that it's still an all white committee, that all the committees that function in this, come on, and to
So
imply
let's work to change it.
that's fine, but you cannot. What you must understand that now suddenly today the light bulb has gone on for whatever reason, and I am certainly suspicious of the motives. But okay,
What if I
that
got
we
the game?
cannot that suddenly the...
Are you going to
that-
change the color of your house because I do that? Of course not. So what would be my motive? What?
I don't believe you're hearing me. What I am saying,
You said you were suspicious,
Please.
and I want to know,
please,
why are you
hear me.
suspicious?
The fact that you sit at this round table today and say to my daughter and myself, let us now open up the committees. Let's do something to make the committees and the board more diverse. That's fine. It will not suddenly then make all these feelings, make your 8-year history of action or the 20-some-odd year history of action of this community suddenly disappear. If the Ku Klux Klan came and hung, God forbid, lynched somebody, and then today they want to say, oh, I'm sorry, come, it's not going to erase the horror, the hurt, and the ugliness of that period. That's all. The healing has begun, and I applaud you. Thank you. Yes, we will try to get into, to take those steps. That's all I'm trying to say.
You try, and what you're saying is that you're not ready to let go of, and you can't let go of the feelings that you have that you've expressed here today, and that probably you haven't
Not
expressed
so.
all
They're
of
not
them.
going to be so easy.
Not so easy, right?
That's right. It's not going to be.
And-
Oh, I'm on the committee. Oh, I'm on the board. Oh, no problem. No.
Right, right. And Julie, I mean, you've sat here and been going through this discussion, which isn't all that easy discussion to have. Does that, I guess, you know, this has been an important discussion for you to have, obviously, because you brought it back up again and you wanted to talk through some of this. I don't know what your thoughts are about where the discussion is at this point and how you feel about what's come out, whether you think that that's added to your clarity in the situation or understanding of it, and what Elizabeth's views of this are. Has that accomplished some of what you wanted to in having the discussion? And do you?
I can't say there was such clear intention in having it. I do hear Elizabeth saying that there's 400 years of discrimination, and that one gesture, or 8 years in a community, whichever number you want to use, and one gesture doesn't fix everything. And I appreciate that. Of course it doesn't. I guess I just wish that, although it doesn't put everything to rest, I felt like you were willing to be open to this anyway, or instead of just questioning my motives and dismissing it. That's what I wish.
Julie, I am a woman of God. And I don't want to hurt anyone. And as much as I may disagree with you, I don't want to leave you hurt. I am extending my hand. I don't want to hurt you.
Will you work with me?
I will
Will
work
you
with
help
you.
me to work with you?
I will do my best. I will do my best.
Even though I don't like purple houses?
I like purple houses.
What color is it?
Mauve, mauve.
You do have a great job.
I know I do.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think there's much to say really after that.
Thank you.
Well, we've started the healing of 400 years of racism, but we still have a purple mauve house.
Right. You're not giving up that mauve house. I've heard that so far. Well, you've talked through a lot of stuff today, and that's part of what conversation is all about. So I hope that the next steps continue as you intend them to, and if there are other ways in which this kind of process can be helpful, I'm certainly willing to continue it if that's useful, whatever happens next. Do you feel comfortable about where you're leaving this at this point?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Well, Baruch, this is almost unbelievable. If I didn't understand something about the transformative theory and model, maybe I would definitely think it's unbelievable and staged. But certainly the parties decided they wanted to return to the subject of the racism, and they pursued that subject.
Right. Well, and again, it's like we were saying before, it's not over till it's over. It is amazing not just how this whole mediation concludes, but even how this segment begins. You would not expect that, given where we just left off in the previous segment, that this is where it's going. They're off again. In a way, for the first time, they're both in sync on this. They both decide, all right, we're going to talk about the race issue. That's the first time that's happened. And again, that's entirely up to them. So that when both of them make that choice together, then that really does lay a groundwork for having the conversation that they're really now just about to have.
Sure.
And the mediator in this kind of situation, I think it's pretty evident from the tape that I'm not pushing them towards this conversation. I'm not doing anything to push them away from it. Deciding to continue the conversation into this difficult terrain, even after what they've accomplished, is entirely their own decision here.
Right. And you're simply supporting that choice.
Right.
Although it does look in this segment as though you're doing something a little different than in some of the other segments. Not a totally different response, but a maybe more frequent involvement in the conversation. You're certainly in there more often. And you're doing a kind of reflection that is not simply mirroring. It seems to be including a kind of translation of what they're saying, or what I often like to call just what they're trying to say. It's not trying to change what they're saying, but really trying to hear, and I think at times we do hear what they're trying to say in what they're saying. So we can offer that as a kind of reflection, as translation.
Right.
And certainly, so you also seem to be picking up some of the strands of what they had said before, and perhaps that helped you to translate, to understand what they were trying to say, having had so much go on before.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that that is something that is going on here on my part as mediator that is a little bit different than the basic responses we've talked about before, although not a totally new thing. But I think your notion of I'm reflecting not simply what they've said, but what's trying to be said. And there is in doing that, some sense of using what I've heard throughout the mediation as sort of helping them to try to bring this to the surface.
Right, and of course, like any reflection, but even more so here, there's a risk in doing that, of not getting it right.
Right.
And again, your demeanor in the way you present your translation, you offer it, you're willing to be corrected, such as when you mention institutional racism as part of what Elizabeth may be talking about, and she says that's not really it. But it then allows her to go on with what she does want to say.
Right. I think that's one of the values and effects and strengths of this particular response, that it allows the parties, because they really are talking about quite difficult things here, so that it's not easy to surface and articulate what they're saying. Having this kind of reflection, which they can sort of take as it were, kind of as a draft, and if I'm willing to let them throw away the draft, then that gives them a stronger platform to actually move into what exactly it is that they want to say, and find find the exact way that they want to say it, which is, I think, what begins to unfold here. So there's a risk, but it's a risk that is avoided if I'm willing to let go quickly and let them take back control over what exactly it is that they want to express.
And it helps them be clearer about what it is they do want to say by knowing what it wasn't.
Right, and actually I think what's really striking to me here that I think begins to emerge, at least in part supported by some of these interventions, is that Elizabeth reaches a stage, a level of articulation, and I would say even eloquence in this segment that is really striking. The way that she describes what it is that she is concerned about, what it is that she's feeling, really embodies, in a way, the whole meaning, I think, that we attach to the notion of the shift, the empowerment shift, the moving into strength. She has become so clear and so powerful in her ability to express what she's saying that it's stunning in a way.
And also the asking for recognition. When
Right.
she's saying, hear me,
Right. It's interesting.
understand me.
I don't believe you're hearing me. What I am saying,
You said you were suspicious,
Please.
and I want to know,
please,
why are you
hear me.
suspicious?
Elizabeth says not, I want to solve this. And we were talking before, you can't solve an issue like racism, so maybe it's
Right.
not
So why should it even be on the table?
Right.
Right.
But Elizabeth is saying it's not about solving it. I want, please hear me. You must understand. So she's talking about, I want you to hear me, I want you to understand me, and she's using those words. That's really
Right.
quite astonishing.
Right. And goes back to what the research shows that people find valuable about mediation, as well as supporting the theory. It's also interesting what you do at that point. You're obviously hearing her asking Julie to understand and to hear her. And rather than asking Julie if she hears and understands, you do offer Julie an opportunity to speak by asking her if this conversation has provided or at least accomplished some of what she wanted in raising the issue and returning to it.
Right. And Julie, I mean, you've sat here and been going through this discussion, which isn't all that easy discussion to have. Does that, I guess, this has been an important discussion for you to have, obviously, because you brought it back up again and you wanted to talk through some of this. I don't know what your thoughts are about where the discussion is at this point and how you feel about what's come out, whether you think that that's added to your clarity in the situation or understanding of it, and what Elizabeth's views of this are. Has that accomplished some of what you wanted to in having the discussion? And do you? I guess I would
do a
see that
check-in with Julie at that point.
Right, I see that as a kind of a check-in with Julie, and I think that's a useful thing to notice that we've talked about before. That once a very powerful statement has been made by one side, to turn to the listener and directly question them about what have they heard or what do they think, really puts people on the spot in a way which could be very disempowering, very intrusive, so that in a way, especially at this point in the conversation, that's the last thing I'd want to do. I want to do something that can support Julie in responding, if she chooses to some part or other, if anything, of what Elizabeth has said. And the way to do that is not a direct question or kind of a cross-examination, but
or carrying the message to her.
Right. But rather simply checking in and giving her an opportunity to decide what she wants to do. So I think that's exactly right. And it is, again,
it's pretty powerful what happens at that point.
It really is. Again, I use the word amazing, but it's not so amazing because she does hear Elizabeth.
Right.
And what she says, she really hears and says, I hear you.
Right. She actually uses
Yes.
that language. Julie's
Right.
response to Elizabeth is almost the first thing out of her mouth is, I hear what Elizabeth is saying, and I
Right.
appreciate that
Right.
it's difficult to let go of those feelings.
Has that accomplished some of what you wanted to in having the discussion? And do you,
I can't say there was such clear intention in having it. I do hear Elizabeth saying that there's 400 years of discrimination, and that one gesture, or 8 years in a community, whichever number you want to use, and one gesture doesn't fix everything.
So she not only uses the same expression, but she actually captures and shows that she has heard exactly what Elizabeth is saying,
Yeah.
the heart of it.
I think she's also demonstrating an important point that empowerment does not necessarily look strong. I mean, Julie is looking and sounding vulnerable at that point.
Absolutely.
She's been affected. The realization, the recognition has actually affected her. So that it really is a very powerful and moving moment when she says that she hears and understands. But recognition, the hearing and understanding, is not always it's positive, but it's not happy necessarily, or has the strength associated with it that you think of, and the word empowerment implies. But
Right.
she's strong enough to say it. Is the
Exactly.
point, to be
Exactly.
vulnerable, to say it.
That's right. It's vulnerability as
Yes.
strength.
Right.
And she really does show
Yeah.
that. She basically
Right.
drops all of the defenses and all of the resistances and the attempts to justify, and simply accepts what's being said. There's tremendous strength in that.
Right. So that then leads us to see that Elizabeth's turnaround at that point to be not unbelievable, not so amazing, that it is clearly a response to her understanding where Julie is at that point.
Right. Well, I guess people sometimes, in looking at the tape, and we've had this response to it,
Yeah.
look at the very end and at Elizabeth's sudden
Yes.
turnaround,
Yeah.
and say to themselves, really that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's it seems artificial, and I think that what we might say about that is that in context, not only isn't it artificial, but it makes perfect sense in terms of the understanding of conflict in the transformative model.
That's what I wish.
Julie, I am a woman of God. And I don't want to hurt anyone. And as much as I may disagree with you, I don't want to leave you hurt.
Elizabeth, at that point, when Julie has spoken, has got exactly what she's been looking for. She's been heard. She's received that recognition, and she now has moved into herself a position of great strength. And in that position, she's no longer a victim,
Right.
but as we said in the beginning, talking about the model, people want to be neither victims nor victimizers. So
Exactly.
when Julie responds as she does, Elizabeth doesn't want to be
A victimizer.
Right.
Right. And she sees the impact on Julie. She still has a purple house, as she says, with a laugh.
right.
So, she hasn't changed. The positions haven't changed. The disagreement is still there. But there definitely has been a change in the conflict interaction. There's
Right.
been a transformation of conflict.
Right, and I guess that the what we might say in concluding our commentary is that our sense of this tape is that it's a very good example of the transformative model, because it shows that when the quality of the conflict interaction changes, when people do make these empowerment and recognition shifts, then not only have they achieved a different kind of interaction, which itself has, as it seems to both Julie and Elizabeth in this tape, that seems to have enormous value to them. It's pretty clear. But they've also made some really very strong choices about the concrete things that they want to do and want to explore further, probably, in this situation.
Right.
And I guess the only thing that I would add, Sally, is that in a way this tape is a good demonstration not just of the model of transformative mediation, but also the premises that we sometimes talk about underlying the model, because what we really see here is that here in a discussion of probably one of the most difficult issues in our society, we see these 2-3 parties able and willing and wanting to engage in the discussion, and doing so in a way that shows that they have this capacity, both for strengthening themselves and also for eventually opening up and being responsive to one another. They want to do it, and they have the ability to do it. And it's because we believe that that's the case with the parties that we work with, that we believe that this model really can work and offers parties tremendous value. And I think we see that in this tape.
Sure. And we see it in cases day after day.
That's absolutely
as people
true.
practice from this approach. So thank you, Baruch, for making yourself available for this conversation, for this interview. I'm sure it's going to be valuable as people view this tape.
Well, and thanks for being a great partner in conversation, Sally.
Thanks.